Are there any edits needed or changes to the minutes from July? Could we have a motion to approve the minutes? Second? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, so we passed the minutes. We do have a little bit of some house rules that we wanted to go over. First, the restrooms are out and to the left for anyone who's new to this space. We also want to acknowledge and recognize that for today's meeting, we do have a translator, and I'd like 2 minutes for an introduction. So if you can come on down to the microphone and just give us some of your, give us an introduction, please. Thank you. Okay, so commission members, as you see, we have 3 microphones here. So if you would like to speak and you're not near a mic, if the closest person could pass that along so that everyone in the audience could hear, that would be great. All right, so at this time, we're just going to go down the agenda and look up some updates and reports. And first up, we want to introduce the city manager and police chief. So we'd like to bring up Ms. Deborah Campbell and Chris Bailey. We have microphones both to your left and right.
So thank you for inviting us to provide you with an update on a couple of things. One, I would like to introduce the Chief of Police, and then secondly, provide you with a presentation around a very, very important policy that you all have been working on for a number, I think maybe even years, related to the written consent. So I'm going to start. Again, my name is Deborah Campbell. I serve in the role as the city manager of Asheville. I have been here 8 months and 12 days, not that I'm counting. It has been a pleasure coming here, and I'm really, really excited about the work that we have underway. And I'm particularly excited about the person that I'm going to introduce to you, who is Chief Chris Bailey. Hopefully everyone has the agenda. There are 2 things. The first is the introduction of the City of Asheville Chief of Police Chris Bailey packet, and then the second is the draft written consent policy. So I'm going to start with the introduction. I thought it was really, really important for me to give just a little bit of background on how we got to where we are and why we selected Chris as our Chief of Police. When I was first hired in December, we had 1 month left for the previous Chief of Police tenure with the City of Asheville. So I immediately was thrown into the throes of searching for a new Chief of Police. We hired a consulting firm or search firm called the Police Executive Research Forum, or the acronym PERF, to kind of manage the process for us. That happened in December and January in terms of us issuing the RFP and then hiring Perf as our search company. We hosted a number of public events. In fact, our first event was held in this space. And we hosted an event to talk about competencies, skill sets, attributes, things that the community felt were vitally important in order for us to help us choose the chief of police, but more importantly, to help us craft the position profile. We had public meetings, we had online surveys, we had volunteers going out and interviewing people face to face in order for us to compile all of this information about, again, attributes and characteristics. We used that feedback to craft the position profile, which you have, hopefully if you have an agenda, that profile, the final profile, is attached. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to talk about some of the things that we were looking for and what we got from the community in terms of competencies and, again, attributes and characteristics. The first was leadership. I'm going to kind of emphasize some of the things in terms of the position profile that I feel were not most important, but clearly was demonstrated by Chief Bailey when we went through the interview process. So under leadership, a commitment to leading an open and transparent police department with the goal of establishing a high degree of community trust. The second was community engagement. Must understand and get to know the different neighborhoods that make up the city of Asheville and the differences in their concerns and perspectives regarding police services. Under management skills, an understanding of the recommendations contained in the final report of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. Under inclusion, a commitment to increasing the diversity of the department at all levels of the organization. And then lastly, under interpersonal skills, superior interpersonal skills that demonstrate confidence and a commitment to being visible, available, and approachable within the department and in the community with the goal of improving neighborhoods for everyone. We interviewed, we had 9 candidates. We interviewed all 9, got down to 2 candidates, and I am happy to present to you our new Chief of Police, Chief Chris Bailey. He was hired in June, started on July the 29th. Now, he started on the 29th. He was hired in June. Okay. All right. Just clarification. We didn't hire him and he started the same day. Okay. So thank you all for your indulgence in allowing me to have this extended introduction of him, because what's important to me is I know that you all want to hear about his experience and what he's done and all that, but I wanted to make sure that you all knew that we were as consistent with choosing the person that and the attributes that you all said were needed for this position. So with no further delay, I will ask Chris to come up, and thank you so much for agreeing to come to the City of Asheville.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
I am extremely honored and privileged to have been selected for this position. It was there were probably a lot of good candidates, City Manager, and I appreciate the confidence you have in me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and to address this commission and to address the community. Tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm going to be very brief because no one likes to stand up and showboat, and that's certainly not my style. But I was sworn in as a law enforcement officer in the city of Indianapolis in 1999. My first assignment, like many police officers, is in the patrol, in the beat. I worked a small geographic area on the south side of our town, when beat policing was really important in the city of Indianapolis before we merged with the sheriff's office and some things changed and we lost some of that community-based, community-oriented policing that had worked so well in the city of Indianapolis for so long. 2005, I had the privilege of being promoted to the rank of sergeant. From there, I was assigned to one of our patrol divisions as a street supervisor. And then in 2007, we merged with the law enforcement division of our sheriff's office and created the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. And for those of you who don't know about Indianapolis, it's about 400 square miles and encompasses both the county and the city. There's some small geographic areas in there that are unincorporated that we do not patrol. But for the most part, we patrol about 300. They patrol. I gotta say, I'm not we anymore. They patrol about 350 square miles, about 900,000 residents. Current authorized strength in Indianapolis Police Department is about 1,642 officers, with the goal of getting to 1,743 by the end of the year. I was promoted to lieutenant in 2011 after spending time in the FBI Safe Streets Task Force. From there, when I was promoted, I took over the gang unit. I was a gang unit commander for a few years before then Chief of Police Richard Height, who came from Baltimore to Indianapolis, asked me to be his public information officer. Did that for a couple years, and then he sent me in the commander role to the North District, where I really learned how to work in conjunction with the community to solve problems. North District is about 80 square miles, 150,000 full-time residents, very similar to Asheville in the demographics and the issues and the culture, and that's where I learned the most and where I had the most fun as a police executive. I also led the Homeland Security Division, overseeing the security plans for multiple major events within the city, including the Indianapolis 500 and other major events in the city. And then my final assignment there was as the Deputy Chief of the Criminal Investigations Division, overseeing 330 detectives, Major Crimes Division, Homicide, Robbery, Aggravated Assault, Sex Crimes, Centralized Narcotics Task Force. So that's the quick resume for me. I don't know if that's what you wanted, Madam Chair, or if you want to go into the next agenda item and talk a little bit about the implied consent, or the written consent.
That is the next item on the agenda, but before we do that, I couldn't kind of move forward with the written consent without first acknowledging the NAACP and just the people that actually took the time and sweat and tears into this work. And so we thank you so much, Chief Bailey, for just being here and sharing your story and your background. If you would just give us about 2 minutes before you come back on, I'd like to call up Dee Williams.
Yep.
And Carmen Ramos. Okay, great. And Dee's just going to give us just a little bit of background information. As Dee is coming up, if I will just mention to the audience, as much as we love community and we appreciate everyone who is here, we really want to stress that we hold all comments until public comment. Thank you. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. And thank you to the board of the Human Relations Council of the City of Asheville. I also want to thank Carmen Reynolds Kennedy, who's our president of the Asheville-Buncombe branch of the NAACP. I see Marianne Newman over there, who is one of our Police Reform Criminal Justice Committee members. I also want to cite Barbara McDaniel, who is also a member, and also Patrick Conant with PRC Applications, who worked with us on this. And I don't want to be remiss in mentioning Ian Mance, who was legal counsel to us. And also, when we first started out, Daryl Atkinson, who was a White House fellow, who put us ultimately in touch with Daryl Atkinson. So I just want to thank all of those folks, because we would not be here without that. And lastly, but not least of all, Manager Deborah Campbell, for just her very progressive and innovative work that she did and her attitude in working with us. The Asheville-Buncombe County NAACP most recent meeting with the city manager, Deborah Campbell, was on July 23, 2019. In attendance were Carmen Ramos Kennedy, President NAACP, Dee Williams, Chair of the NAACP Criminal Justice Reform Committee, and Patrick Conant of PRC Applications in support of the NAACP. This is the NAAC's takeaway about written consent to search and policing from that meeting, including our concerns. The NAACP feels Ms. Campbell is genuinely committed to moving implementation of written consent forward. She indicated that the new chief is on board with the current draft of the written consent policy, with the safe and practical exception removed. We see that the city manager is keenly aware of the siloed history of Asheville Police Department and how being so caused problems with and for our community. Her stated goal is to repair the relationship between the department and the community and feels it needs to be implemented as a holistic and integrated manner. In a holistic and integrated manner. The NAACP recognizes that Ms. Campbell sees written consent as the tool requested by the community and council, though she may have personally approached the issue a bit differently. However, she is committed to move this policy forward. Based on what we heard, Ms. Campbell is also interested in other focus areas and initiatives to address APD's issues, including discussions around training and reviewing body camera policies and practices. The city manager spoke about instituting protocols and policies around body-worn cameras that would ensure that they were turned on during the entirety of the officer's shifts. The NAACP recommended to the city manager that an outside agent or agency review the footage, one moment please, including discussions around training and reviewing body camera policies and practices. The city manager spoke about instituting all of these protocols and policies around the body-worn camera policies and procedures. Will actually be followed. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay. How do we know the policy will actually be followed? We reflect back to a meeting with the Racial Justice Coalition where Interim Chief Wade Wood stated that he wasn't convinced written consent would actually address the racial disparities in stops and searches. We are concerned that that narrative and others may be used in an attempt to convince city leadership and council to delay written consent and return to an opaque planning process without community input. What can next steps look like? If the current written consent is implemented successfully for vehicles, then when do we move to expand the policy to apply to pedestrians? We trust that it will be within months, under a year, as stated by the city manager. After that, what is the process to ensure that policies that limit regulatory stops and restrict the criteria under which consent searches can be requested are written and implemented in a timely manner without the addition of any loopholes? The NAACP believes all of these policies must be implemented before we can expect to see a significant shift in outcomes on traffic stops. The NAACP's position is that we need to open up the Asheville Police Department policy process to the public. We need to establish a way that finally gets the public a seat at the table to collaboratively discuss with Asheville Police Department policies and processes. We feel that Ms. Campbell is on board with this concept. It would be an important and a positive step to hear the city manager and new chief publicly commit to the same. There are many details that need to be figured out, including a clear process that allows policy discussions to emerge from organizations or individuals, allowing these ideas to be discussed collaboratively with APD and the city manager, and then move through some process that may include CPAC, the Human Relations Commission of the City of Asheville, and the Public Safety Committee of Council, finally arriving at Council. We feel it's important that this process is established as part of ongoing meaningful efforts to improve police and community relations, and not something we just discuss in response to a crisis. Our conversation included various other topics as well. The city manager talked about possible duplications on police matters in CPAC, Public Safety Committee, and the HRCA. She stated that a chief focus of the city was minority business development, and spoke about the staff analysis and design of a system by information technology that would provide minority business enterprise participation rates on a timely basis. The city entered into contracts with 2 new minority businesses last month. This is what the city manager reported. We addressed Asheville's disparities, the worst in all of North Carolina. Minority business, Black student achievement gap, racial profiling, and some of the highest morbidity and mortality rates in the state. Ms. Campbell said the city is looking at utilizing strategic partnerships with community organizations to address issues that contribute to crime, poverty, and social isolation in city neighborhoods. We feel the use of key performance metrics in selecting and managing these strategic partnerships is essential, as many are funded with few moving the needle in a positive direction for the most vulnerable among us. The NAACP appreciates this opportunity to address the HRCA today. A hard copy of this report is available to submit. We are happy to submit an electronic version if needed. And lastly, I'd like to thank Councilman Keith Young and also Councilman Brian Haynes for his leadership. Without them, we couldn't have moved this process forward either, and the rest of council as well for the unanimous vote to adopt written consent. And Madam President, may I please approach to submit a copy to you for your records?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And thank you to the NAACP for spearheading this process. We appreciate Ms. Campbell and just the work that she's done and the support. I specifically appreciated the word tool. So this written consent could be a tool for our community, and also looking at the concerns. So with that being said, I would like to again invite you up, Chief Bailey, and let's kind of go over some of those concerns, if you may, and just looking at a discussion, but of course a presentation of updated information pertaining to the written consent.
Okay, thank you. As I said again, for those who may be new coming in, there were 2 agenda items. One was the introduction of the chief, and then the next one is the details that I'm going to go over as it relates to the written consent policy. But before I go and dive any deeper into the policy itself, I want to thank again the work that this community has done around this important policy and issue, and also to thank Dee and Carmen and others, Patrick, who attended the meeting and were very, very open-minded, listened, and hopefully and I'm going to say this and I may regret it, but they're going to hold me accountable, not only them, but the rest of the community in terms of implementation. So I don't know that I necessarily have to go into a whole lot of detail related to this first section that I have, the background in the draft policy. All of this happened before I got here, but what I can recall from all of my conversations with staff is this was an effort spearheaded by the NAACP, the Southern Coalition of Social Justice, and various other organizations, requested that the Asheville Police Department and City Council look at the concept of consent to search. There was data, all kinds of data, that related to the disproportionate number of particularly black and brown people that were being stopped and searched. And there was tremendous concern. And one of the tools that was suggested is, again, a process of consent to search, and that it was recommended that it be a written document, a form that a police gives to someone if they stop them to either consent or not consent to an actual search. There were numerous meetings and discussions that were held, and presentations and back and forth. And this all happened again before I got here. The interim city manager was directed to work with APD to develop the policy. Then when I was hired in December, I continued the work and working with those organizations to develop this policy. What is the problem to be addressed or solved with written consent? I think it's a lack of trust of APD. And that's it simply. However, and the chief and I have talked about this. I've talked with Carmen and Dee and Patrick. This is a tool. It is not going to be a panacea to improve or to enhance trust and accountability. We hope it does, but I don't think it is the end all or the be all. It is a beginning. We're going to do lots of stuff, and the chief may talk about some of those other things we know we need to prop up written consent with before we can truly say, I think we're going to move the needle around trust and accountability around APD. So the issue we're trying to address, we think, is lack of trust of APD. What do we hope to achieve with the written consent policy? First and foremost, reduce the number of people, especially African Americans, being stopped and searched without permission. Inform people of their rights to refuse or consent to a search. Hold APD accountable for stops and especially searches. Define consistent protocol for stops and especially searches for APD officers. And again, be a tool to help improve and strengthen community trust in APD. So the development of the policy. Again, we've been working on this for a long time. There was a draft that the city developed, had the Southern Coalition of Social Justice and NAACP review. So what I'd like to do is this first attachment from the agenda is a draft that we originally sent to these two groups for them to review. We also reviewed it with council. Council raised some concerns but said, you know, we'll really be satisfied once we get the community satisfied with the draft. So the reason that I'm showing you all of this information is to demonstrate that we had a draft. There were responses in terms of revisions that most felt needed to be made. So if you go to the second page, is about 100% incorporation of the suggested changes. And so I'll just go just very, very briefly over the actual policy. Well, let me just say this. You all can read, and I don't need to necessarily read all this information for you, but essentially the major issue of contention was a phrase in our original draft that talked about when safe and practical, an officer will obtain written consent. And that related to any kinds of exceptions. And this now read, all traffic stops will have this protocol. And so I will, I'll stop there and say that the written consent policy right now, this draft policy only applies to vehicle stops. We worked with Ian and Carmen and met with them and said, I really have a whole lot of data that the biggest issue is around vehicle stops. I would like to have like a test drive of this policy to see how it works before we apply it to a broader array, for example, for persons, I think there were for persons, for residences, businesses, and within a person's property, within a person's possession. Before we move that far, I wanted to have a demonstration that this policy was doing what it needed to do, moving the metrics on things that we wanted addressed before we went further. The chief may think differently, and this is the chief's work. He has to work with police officers. He has to do the training in order to implement this policy. So I will follow his lead. So if he wants to do everything now, we'll do everything now. But my gut tells me I need a dry run of the policy. And so with that, I will ask the chief to come up to talk about kind of implementation and rollout, and then we would turn it back over to the commission and see whatever way you all want to handle any questions or whatever. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. So I was going to talk about a few things briefly. This was the draft policy that was given to me when I took the job on July 29th. I have not made any changes or any of that at this point. What I told the city manager and those that I interviewed with, and I've been consistent with it, I even believe I gave some interviews with it, is that before we implement any policy, we want to make sure that we get feedback from all those that are going to be impacted by the policy, and that included the officers in the police department. One of the first things I did when I came was solicit that feedback. I have that feedback, and I've gotten it from the officers that wanted to provide the feedback to us, and from both the PBA and the FOP representatives. I think that has to be done. That's part of the due diligence. Additionally, I wanted to be here tonight to hear the feedback that you have from the community and from this commission before we finalize this. I will tell you that there are a few small structural changes in the draft that I will be making. It's not going to change it substantially that it changes anything, but there's some wording issues and also some process issues that need to be adjusted. Number one, the form that we have currently is inadequate to serve the needs that the officers will have in order to make sure it's done correctly. Number two is we want to make sure that we're able to count the number of times that written consent is done and how we store that information. For those that you don't know, evidence.com is for video and pictures. So it can be uploaded into evidence.com as a matter of course, but that doesn't help us then extract the data on how many times it occurs, the demographics associated to the search, whether or not the person consented or not. So we need to make sure we also have a way to house those in a hard copy form or at least electronic form for evidentiary purposes, because inevitably with consent, that's going to make any search of a vehicle that much stronger for court proceedings. So if evidence is recovered after a written consent, usually in court proceedings, when verbal consent is given on an incident, defense attorneys, on behalf of their clients, usually challenge the validity and the whether or not consent was done willfully or not. So with written consent, that is also going to strengthen criminal cases when contraband or other evidence is found. And so it's important that we have a way to maintain that piece of evidence for discovery to defense counsel during court proceedings. So I talked about the process process issues that we still have to work out, and I had a conversation with our IT department this week, the director of the IT department, about ways we can do that, and we can track this information so that when you ask, inevitably the community is going to ask for the information, that we have it available to us quickly and can provide that to you when you ask for it. One of the things I also discussed with the city manager and the interview board, and I was quite taken back by the question during the interview. I don't know if Deborah remembers, because it's not something, written consent for vehicle searches is not something that's widespread across the country. Criminal law, case law is pretty clear on what officers can and can't do, but we also work for the community, and therefore we change and we adapt based on what the community's needs are. But that being said, it's important that when we have any policy that we have good training associated with that policy, because simply putting a policy on paper and pushing it out does not solve a problem and does not teach our officers how they're expected to act and what they're expected to do. So there has to be training involved in that. And as part of that training, we're going to, at least initially, we've had discussions. I'm not committing to anything here tonight because it's still trying to work out how long the training should be, what exactly it should look like, and who should be involved. But at least initially, it should just be in general traffic stops, how they work, racial bias, implicit bias training, surviving verbal conflict or verbal de-escalation, what the law is, what does probable cause mean, what are some of those things, just to remind people, and exactly what the procedure is for our police department. And I envision, whether or not I get what I like, or what I think would be prudent, would be to invite members of the community to participate in that training with the officers. So you can see how we train them to do a traffic stop, some of the perils associated with those traffic stops, some of the things that officers, or what they're trying to do when they do those traffic stops, and put you in the position of the police in the position of the citizens, so that we have some dialogue there and we start building relationships and we have conversations. Because we're not going to move anything forward without having some true and fruitful conversations with each other. I had implicit bias training in Indianapolis. It was a 2.5-day training, and Fairness in Policing was the company. And what made the session that I sat in that much more impactful is that we sat in there with members of the community members who did not necessarily have a favorable opinion of the police, people who are typically at odds with the police officers. And so during that 2.5-day session, not only did we learn about just the science of bias, which we all have. Every person in this room maintains that bias, and how important it is that it's our actions that really count. And then, but hearing the stories from those in the community, and having the community hear the stories from the officers, which was really important. So that's similar to what I envision when we roll this out. And I talked about that. So I don't know that there's anything else. I don't have a timeline for implementation. We have. I would like to do it as soon as possible. We have, like I said, I've been here 3 weeks, and we have training on the books already for the year, including EPIC, which is ethical policing is contagious. Ethical policing is contagious, which is courageous, contagious too. So it can be. We want it to be contagious, as well as finishing up fairness in policing and other things. So you have my commitment that written consent for vehicles is going to be policy in the Asheville Police Department.
Just one other thing I'd like to maybe add a little bit more information about, or just to clarify. He mentioned that he was taken aback by a question being asked in the interview process around written consent. We actually used the policy, the original draft policy that we had, to interview the candidates. Because if that candidate was not comfortable with written consent, they probably were not going to be hired, unless they could have a compelling reason for why written consent wasn't the answer. So that narrowed us down to maybe 2 candidates. Those 2 candidates, we had discussion with the revised document, because by that time I'd gotten feedback and we went back and forth, and so the revisions, we used it again, and I interviewed him again and say, are you comfortable? Can you implement this policy? And his response was, yes, but I've got to do all the things that he just mentioned in terms of implementation. I've got to work with the police officers. I've got to get them trained. I've got to do those things that will help make this policy successful. But he also said, and this was really a compelling reason for us hiring him, is, Deborah, you do know that written consent is not the answer. It is one of the things that we have got to do, but it's not going to be the panacea. So I will leave you with that. If there's any additional questions that you have of us as it relates to the policy or process, we'll be more than happy to try to respond.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. So, Commission, this is just specifically for the written consent and not the questions for Chief Bailey. And audience, community, we'll be moving down to open it up for public comment. And I know some of you are really anxious to speak, but we do ask that you please keep your side conversations to yourself. With that being said, I'd like to open up questioning for the Commission. And if you're near Mike, just grab it. If not, we'll pass it. We're holding public comment.
Sir, we're going to give everybody a chance, okay? Brother, believe me, we see you, we hear you, we're going to get the chance. One of the first things I'd like to say is, first of all, thank you, Ms. Campbell, Mr. Bailey, for coming in today, coming into community, and coming into the wheelhouse that has been one of the most affected areas in the city by policing. So I really do appreciate you folks and the powers that be are in the room today. There's a lot of people out here. I just want to say thank you all for coming out to this important meeting and being able to be a part of this format. Second of all, I'd like to say that this is a historic moment for the city of Asheville. It's not only historic for the city of Asheville, it's historic for the state of North Carolina, as we're one of the few policing communities that have implemented this aspect of policing. A lot of people have worked really hard to bring 21st policing to the city of Asheville and a broader spectrum than just in community. We try to bring this throughout the city and the county. So I want to thank everybody who has been involved in implementing in that aspect of this. One of the things that I would like to ask a question about is, and I do understand and I appreciate the honesty and the forthcoming of the city manager and the police chief at this time. You know, honesty is the best policy when you come to people. And, you know, right now, you know, we do have a new police chief and a new city manager, and we are moving towards a new vision for this city as far as equity and inclusion. And that takes time. It's going to take some work, and it's going to take some back and forth comments and some conversations. And I know things do not get solved overnight. So I'm not looking for a instantaneous solution to any of the problems that have plagued this city and community for over 100 years. So, you know, we're just not fixing some of the institutionalized and systemic issues of this city. What I like to ask of the new police chief is, do you think that if there was written consent given, could we have curbed some of the homicides that have happened by police to community? And do you think that that written consent policy might decrease the interactions between police and community to where we can have officers go home safe, community go home safe, and the interactions between those two entities are not as volatile as they were before, given the circumstances of, you know, you have to kind of, you know, policing has a mentality of, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty. So, and that's one of the reasons why that written consent policy was so special, was because it could reduce the interactions between police and community. So, you know, given what you've seen or what you've heard or have researched about Asheville, do you think that that can reduce, because that's the hope of this policy. We want to reduce the interaction between police and community. The less interaction, the less collateral outcomes we have altogether.
Well, first I'll say I don't want to necessarily reduce the interactions with police and the community. What I want to do is increase the positive interactions between the police and the community, and that should be our goal. Do I think written consent is going to reduce those negative interactions? You know, I think it's yet to be seen. I mean, we'll have to see what the data holds out. Like I've said and the city manager said, these policies don't exist very many places across the country, and so understanding whether or not they reduce the interactions or just reduce the amount of times that vehicles are searched based solely on consent would have to be something we need to look at and study, whether or not this gets us what we're all trying to get, which is not to have these negative encounters, and then especially negative encounters that end up badly. So I can't answer that question right now because I just don't think there's data there to give you a definitive answer whether or not it will or not.
Chief Bailey, thank you for being here. I wanted to ask you, you said you had some tweaks to make on this draft. When would that document be available for us to review?
I haven't started doing it yet. I just finished getting feedback from the officers from within the department, and then tonight I'm going to listen here tonight, and then I've searched high and low for draft policies to try to look at to make sure that we're covering everything that we need to cover, to make sure the officers are clear on what the expectations are. So I have not made any changes to the document itself. No.
Gotcha. And just to follow up, have you looked at Durham? I think that they are doing this in Durham.
I have looked at their policy. Their policy is there's pieces of it that I think are important, but I also think it's a little vague, and so we need to make sure that that it's pretty black and white to make sure that it's followed correctly.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions from the commission? And then we'll be going right into public comment.
Hi, thank you very much for being here. Welcome to Asheville. And I love all these questions. The Office of Professional Standards handle police complaints here in Asheville. Is it possible, and are you willing to create a non-biased oversight board of police and non-police community members to review questionable written consent police encounters?
Obviously, I mean, just being 3 weeks on the job, I don't know that I've had time to examine all those issues and what is allowed, what isn't allowed by state law, and how those review processes work. So I can't give you an answer on that tonight.
Anyone else? Ms. Betty?
Sorry. I'd like to know if you can include or consider including information that includes the language for a citizen to use when refusing written consent, refusing to have the search done.
I don't know if I understand your question correctly, but I think that it's in the policy that it spells out what happens when consent is refused.
So when a citizen refuses to have the search done, what is the good language that they should use when saying, I don't want my car searched?
Yeah, that's it. No,
Yes.
I don't want you to
Just
search
say-
my car. Yeah.
Okay.
No, you can't. I do not give you permission, or I want an attorney. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for being here. Thank you, Deborah. Always good to see you. I don't envy the job that you have at all. How many municipalities in North Carolina currently have a written consent policy? Do we know?
I really only think, I believe it's only Durham that I know of. Most of if there is a written consent policy on the books in other places, it's not shall language, it's if feasible language in most of them. So there's a lot of places that have written consent policies, but not to the extent of a shall policy on every encounter.
And I guess I kind of agree with the safe and practical language being tweaked a bit. But there are going to be some circumstances where executing a written consent search is just not going to be possible.
Yeah.
And that's for the benefit of all involved. How can that language be incorporated so that, and I guess you can't plan for every situation, but
yeah.
there has to be some caveat there that there are going to be circumstances where an officer, even the best officer with the best of intentions, cannot obtain consent.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and I think that we can address some of those issues in training. But just for an example would be, there are sometimes people do not want to sign their name on something. They'll say, yeah, officer, I don't care if you search my house or my car, but I'm not signing your paperwork. That does happen a lot. And then we have cases where people want to cooperate with the police, where they want to be good neighbors and they want to say, this is not mine, but there's a gun under that seat. You can get it, but I'm not putting my name on paper, because if there's criminal charges, then that becomes discovery, and now everybody's going to know that it was me that cooperated with the police, and so now you have witness safety issues that have to be encountered. So these are what we call them in Indianapolis as general orders, because you cannot write a policy for every specific situation. And so we're going to have to address some of that in training, and that's some of the wording I'm looking at in the policy, is how do we not make it or give that out, but it would have to be articulated and approved by a supervisor before. I mean, that's my thoughts, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but those exact same concerns have been brought to me by other fronts, and I haven't wrapped my head around all that yet.
Okay, at this time now, we want to open it up to public comment. So if you would like to ask a specific question, please step up to the microphones. And I just would like to say that this portion right here is specifically pertaining to written consent. We also want to let you know that we honor you, we hear you, and we acknowledge you. However, we're not going to speak in terms of attacking our city personnel that's here today. We want to acknowledge that and recognize that they've been at the job not even a year. So please come up with your questions, and we open the floor now to public comment. Or you can raise your hand and project your voice if you feel the need to do that. Go ahead, Ms. Libby.
Absent probable cause or search warrant, the officer cannot search your car. Well, I mean, you're supposed to be let down the road, and if you don't, then there's going to be there'll be issues. If once that body cam is reviewed, if you make a complaint, the body cam will be reviewed, and we'll see that occurred. Yes. Implied consent is something that's attached to your driver's license. So when you get your driver's license, you give implied consent, that you're going to do a breathalyzer test if you're drunk. It doesn't have to do with the search of your car. No, it would not impact your driver's license. Usually the penalty for violating implied consent would be just a suspension of your driver's license. That only has to do with driving while intoxicated. Okay. I can't, you still have to, under the law, you still have to have probable cause, a search warrant, or consent to search the car regardless. One of those three things has to exist. That's the law. No. It's reasonable suspicion for a stop. So I can make a traffic stop, but it doesn't mean I can search your car. The United States Constitution in the Fourth Amendment protected your house and your property from unreasonable search and seizure. That's why consent, search warrant, or probable cause has to exist for any search.
Any other public comments? Oh, yes. Thank you. Ms. Grant? I'm sorry, Ms. Grant, if you could just raise your voice a little bit. Your microphone.
So, one of the first things that you do or a police officer does when they stop a person in a vehicle is what asks for their driver's license. So, in terms of what you said, when I asked you about the driver's license, and you said it was a consent to check for alcohol.
If I pull you over and I believe that you've been drinking while driving, right? I get you out of the car. I'm reverting back to Indiana law, right? So, city attorney, tell me if I'm wrong. So I get you out of the car. I believe that you're intoxicated. I get out a card that's called an implied consent. I read it to you that says, as a condition of your driver's license, you have to submit to a chemical test for intoxication. If you refuse that test, your license will be suspended or may be suspended for up to a year. That's implied consent. Attorney, am I correct? Okay. Implied consent has nothing to do with the traffic stop and consent to search your car. Because if you are intoxicated, that is probable cause, and then you can be arrested.
Are there any more public comments? Carol?
Yeah, what you're reviewing is a section within a policy. So this is a section within the search and seizure policy. That paragraph that you're talking about exists in the full policy. So you're exactly right. Yep. 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 Okay. So once the policy is complete, that policy will be available online, and we can make it available however you want it. And in that, in the entirety of the policy, there is an introduction that discusses just what you just said.
And if you will, please use the microphone. Maybe if we can pass the mic, if we have a volunteer, someone who can help pass it. Not Ms. Davis. Thank you. And if you will address your public comment to the commission, and then just we'll. Okay. Yes. It's fine.
Okay. My question is, I think it's pretty well known that a lot of people are really reluctant to sign things because they fear for consequences later. And that was brought up before, but I'm not hearing it being addressed. So I'm wondering if you have a body camera on and the camera's required to be on, if there's some avenue that way that people can just say on camera, I do not want you to search my car. Because I think relying on people feeling confident that signing something is not going to have adverse consequences is probably not realistic. Thank you.
The policy is clear that all traffic stops will be recorded on their body cams. The entire interaction will be recorded on the body cam. So if they say no, it'll be captured.
Do people have the option to say no? I do not want you to search my car, as opposed to signing.
Yes, you don't have to sign to refuse. Your verbal rejection of the offer or the ask is valid.
And will the officers be trained to accept that?
They have to accept it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because even if let's say that for some reason an officer who decides that they're going to do the search anyway, any evidence that's produced as a result of that search is no longer valid. Yeah, this is informed. They'll be informed when consent is asked. There'll be specific questions to deal or statements saying you have the right to refuse. You have the right to talk to an attorney before you give consent, or you have the right to require a search warrant before you search my car. You do not have to sign to reject consent. Simply saying, I do not want you to search my car is good enough. The officer. What's that? I haven't thought about that part, but simply reading it and saying no is enough. That's it. The officer should not question anymore.
Wouldn't a signature be more beneficial when you're giving consent to search versus refusal?
That is
That's
the policy.
where the signature is most
Okay,
important.
we need one at a time. Go ahead, Mike.
No, that was it. I mean, I think you're getting hung up a little bit on what the signature is about. The signature is paramount importance when you're allowing an officer to search your vehicle, not refusing something. That's the clarification I think that maybe is missing. When you're signing something, you are permitting the officer to take that action to search your vehicle. Saying no stops it. There's nothing else to be wrong unless the officer has reasonable suspicion to detain you. If he does not, then he has to let you know. Now, he can follow you, including an officer from hailing you, but the stop should end.
Ma'am, does that clarify what you were saying? Mr. Hack. Okay, thank you. Mr. Harris?
I guess my question is more about going forward. Chief Bailey, I think you had said that Durham is the only other city in North Carolina that may have this consent. So Durham is the only city, and very few cities in the country, I think you said.
That require it.
That require
Some
it.
may suggest that it's a good idea, but they don't require it.
Okay.
They have the when safe and feasible or when plausible language that gives the officer the discretion.
And I think you also said something about you had some discussion with your officers already, or some committee that you've already discussed at some point.
Yeah, I sent out the same draft last week, I believe, Jerry, and asked for feedback to be back to me by Wednesday of last week, so I could compile it in preparation for this meeting.
What kind of comments did you get back from the officers?
Surprisingly, there weren't that many that were negative about it. There were some wording issues that were valid. There were some concerns, sir, that you brought up about what happens if someone is okay with you searching the car, but they don't want to sign the form. What happens if somebody wants to cooperate with police but don't want themselves on, because they don't want themselves on body cam. They don't want it that listed for discovery purposes. Those were the type of comments. There were a few comments that you can that were anticipated by me, that there's going to be there'll be less proactive police work and things like that, and that very well could be for a short period of time, but I don't see it impacting proactive police work in the long term.
And the last question I have is that I know very few of your officers now, and the ones that I've sort of known are very young. Seems like they're very young. I don't know whether they are local or not local. Did they come from other cities? And I suspect that most of them have been through some technical training at community colleges and things. Is this contrary to what they've been trained, this policy?
It will be, yes,
okay.
Because the federal and state laws both allow for consent based on verbal affirmation. It does not require a written consent.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief Bailey, I'd like to ask you a question. I don't know if you can necessarily answer this, and if anybody from the PBA or FOP is in the audience, feel free to answer this question. What was the attitude of those officers in those entities? Because we've seen some public comment from some of those individuals that was not exactly what I would say in alignment of what we view as 21st century policing as far as the city of Asheville and Bucks County. So can you elaborate, or if any of those folks are in the room, could you please stand up and elaborate for yourselves, the attitude of those two entities, the PBA and the FOP, about this policy itself?
Well, I can tell you,
FOP is Fraternal Order of Police, PBA is the Police Benevolent Association.
I can tell you my interaction was very cordial, and they were very respectful in their comments. And the concerns that they have, I think that we all know what those were, and those were the when safe and practical wording within the policy. But they weren't adversarial or disrespectful to me during our conversations. But that they also work for our police department, so I would expect that they wouldn't be.
I guess my question is, because these folks are civil servants who are actually answerable to us as taxpayers and the citizens of the city. And I just want to make sure these folks are on board to follow your direction and the city manager's leadership. That's one of the issues we've had with policing here in this city, is that we've had some entities, and I don't want to get into very complex situations, but we just had, the Johnny Rush situation come to, and we had an officer who was viewed by the Civil Service Board to have been telling the truth about this officer having some rogue ideology, let's just say. And I just want to make sure that if there are officers who feel this way, that they will be dealt with not only by you, but by our city manager in accordance to our city policy and to our Civil Service Board as it has due process to our citizens.
I have an obligation as the police chief to be apolitical and to work with every single entity and citizen in the city of Asheville. I don't get to pick and choose which groups I can listen to, which groups I don't get to listen to, which ones I work with and which ones I won't. But that said, decisions made on policy, and other things are going to be based on fairness, equity. They're going to be based on whether or not there are clear violations of rules, policies, and within the law. And when officers step out of those, there are consequences when they do. So you have my commitment when appropriate and when due process is given, like everyone deserves. The officers will be accountable when they step out.
One of the policies related to if an officer does not turn on his cam and something happens. If someone does not give consent and the officer has not turned on his cam, are there consequences for the officer?
Yes.
What are they?
I don't know that. That hasn't come across my desk to know what the presumptive disciplinary action is against that. If it's progressive in type, is it coaching, is it written reprimand, those kind of things. I can't answer that question definitively. But there are consequences for not following the policy.
I realize that you've just been here, actually both of you have been here less than a year. How do you feel about giving some sort of timeline? Do you have a timeline in your mind where you would like for this to become operational?
I wish I could give you, I want it to be as quick as possible, but we're in August, and we have a training schedule, and so it's important that we train, and so we're going to have to see where we can fit that in, because every time we pull in an officer for a 4 or 8 hour training, we pull them out of the neighborhoods, out of answering 911 calls, and we have to make sure that we balance the community's need for protection with being able to train properly, because we have, not only do we have state mandated training, but APD, from my at least initial view, has quite a bit of training that we do on top of what's required from the state of North Carolina. So we have to balance both of those issues. So I can't give you a timeline. I would like it as soon as possible.
Based on your training schedule right now, do you see it happening by the end of 2019?
I don't want to give you an answer and then not be able to commit to that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any more comments from the public?
So I know drive a lot, and I was reading the paper and say then is almost focus only about, because a lot of the African American is stop a lot. So I hope that this reading consent is in Spanish too, because a lot of the brown communities stop a lot too. And saying that I'm not drive a lot, I try to minimize my life the more than I can. So I walk a lot, I drive my bicycle a lot. And the reason that I was asking you about that probably cause is because the police haven't stopped me like 6 times, walking and driving my bicycle, taking pictures. So one of the last times they stopped me and say, oh, hey, stop there. I'm going to check your backpack because you fit the description of somebody doing graffiti. And you can see my clothes, I paint a lot. So I look at my clothes and I think, oh my God, I'm going in. I fit the description. So, and you can see me. Even in this room, I don't fit the description of a lot of people. So you think this happened in downtown, and they look in my backpack. So I was thinking, like, and in this point, we was doing I'm part of, I'm co-director of Bill of Asheville. So in this point, we was doing a training of Know Your Rights for people that live in the street, and then the police was abusing the rights of the people. So you think this week I gave a training about Know Your Rights. And in the same week, the police stopped me and tell me, you fit the description and I'm going to check in your backpack. So it's very powerful. Then we are moving, or the city is moving to reading consent for traffic stop. Only I would like to have a date for start the other one, then is reading consent for pedestrians too. Because like I say, I know drive a lot. So this affect me, and you are saying then you're going to see whatever. So my point is then, like, even another point, they stopped me for driving my bicycle. So I drive my bicycle from one sidewalk to another sidewalk. The police followed me for 2 blocks. They stopped me for 1 hour. They don't know how to give me a ticket because it's not illegal in this state. So they give me a ticket like if I was in a motorcycle. So I went to the court and I present the ticket to the court, and the people was laughing. And they said, oh, you don't have to pay. Like, you was in a bicycle? What? So I guess my point is, I hope then you can think in a way, then you can make a day for start thinking in the pedestrian consent too, because this affects me, and I have been living in this city. I have been living in this area for more than 8 years. So I live here in public housing in Bartlett Arms for 2 years, and I never have this many bad interaction with the police when I was living here in downtown. I haven't had a very bad interaction with the police. So, and the thing for me is like, I understand why they are, or I guess the way that I understand this is that they not welcome me. They are saying, you're not welcome here, why you are back? Every time that you came, I'm going to give you another ticket. Like I say, they haven't given me tickets for take photography in the street, like yesterday. I was taking pictures of part of the work that we do is taking pictures of different stuff. I was taking pictures, and in this moment was coming 2 police officers, and I take a picture of something that I think that I was doing there, and the police stop and say, hey, I was smelling, you was taking a picture of me? I said, no. You sure you was not taking a picture of me? And I said, no, and even if I was, it's not illegal to take a picture in public. So this is what's happening in public. Only for me, the meaning of this is like, I don't want to talk with the police, I don't trust the police. And like she was saying, it's about trust. So this process is going to be a long process because we don't trust the police. And I think then the stuff that you were saying is very powerful because you are bringing what the public is going to be saying. A lot of the faces here is the people that usually came to these meetings. So if we have these questions, like the normal public, the public outside of these meetings is going to have these questions. Then, okay, if I sign in, I win the prize. Like when FedEx came to my house, I signed in for them to give me the packet. So this makes sense, the stuff that you were saying, then if I sign in, they know I don't want you to look in my car, so I need to sign in. It's very confused for me too. So I think it's something to think too, and I hope that if we not finish with a day for the pedestrian consent, I hope that you have in mind then it's another population that no use cars. Then it's pedestrians and ride bicycles, so then we can be beneficiaries for the written consent for pedestrians.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you would like for the written consent to be all-inclusive.
Yeah.
So not just cars, but pedestrians and bike riders as well.
Mm-hmm. And in Spanish too, because like I said, the way that is now, the stuff that we were talking before is then it's going to be in 2 languages, and now for the stuff that I'm reading here is then it's going to be in 1 language, and I hope then one day we have 8 languages, because it's more than 1 language in this city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Poncho. I'm Amy Cantrell, and I'm also with Be Loved Asheville, and I want to thank this commission because you're doing an immense job. I'm so happy that when I think about this town that y'all are at work, it means a great deal to me and the people that I know and love in this community. And I want to welcome you, Chief, to this community. And I'm really grateful that you're willing to build trust. That is one of the big things that I hear coming from you, and to our city manager. So I also want to address pedestrian searches, but I also want to thank the NAACP from the bottom of my heart. They have been working and working for years on this, and we were honored to be able to work beside them. Almost as soon as you all started working, we had been in conversation with one of the groups that are a part of our community. So we're a very intersectional community at Be Loved Asheville, but we have a group called Homeless Boys. And so we were sitting in a circle and we were talking about the criminalization of homeless people, which is a national conversation that we're a part of. This is happening in cities across the country. And we saw it here, and we started working, pulling data with Patrick. And it was really powerful. And so we were sitting in the Criminal Justice Committee of the NAACP and also sitting in the circle of very impacted people. And one of the things that we did was we invited city council people to come and just sit in that circle and hear people's stories. And one of the stories that came up over and over and over again was that folks would get stopped by the police as pedestrians. And what we heard from multiple people was some derivation of, let me search your bag or I'm taking you to jail. which sent off every alarm bell that I have, because that's not a consent search. And so you referenced the Fourth Amendment, which I value deeply, the Constitution. And what the Constitution says is that our property and our homes, I want to talk about people that don't have, their home is not 4 walls and a roof. We have a lot of people in this community who cannot afford to live in this community. They cannot not afford housing. And so that surge of property and home that is on somebody's back as somebody that is without 4 walls and a roof is a real violation to me of the Constitution and somebody's rights, and is deeply troubling. I don't know if you've had somebody go into your space before without your consent, and who may not have love for you, and what that feels like. It feels like a violation. And this is a very public violation. We've had people have everything that they own spread out in public in front of all to view as their backpack is being searched. And so this is not a, every once in a while thing. This was a very common story that we heard in the groups, often of 30 or more people. And so our city manager referenced that you don't have any data about that. And one of the reasons that we don't have data is that we don't catalog those searches. So I have what I call story data. I have a lot of story data about this. And whenever we have story data and we have raw physical data, they match. So we don't have any raw physical data on this, but I believe the stories that our people tell about this. And I've seen it with my eyes. I've seen people stopped by 5 officers, usually 4 or 5, and had all their stuff thrown out in front of people. And so I just want to, we made these recommendations after sitting in a circle for over a year, after pulling public data as a part of a 5-point plan around policies and policing. Only one scant thing has come out of this pieces of paper that I have in front of us, because we were really serious about coming to the police department and to the city to work on solutions to this. So I hope that we will work together and move a lot of these things forward. But one of the things that we said is we support the NAACP and the written consent, because we've seen that too, living in this neighborhood, constant people being stopped and searched as African-American people. And Ms. Kyles, I know this we've talked about this a lot. We've seen a lot of this on this street, on South French Broad and right around this community center. So I am pleading tonight that this be a holistic policy. I think it's going to be confusing for the community and confusing, honestly, for the officers if we're doing written consent for cars but not for bikes and pedestrians. And some folks don't have the luxury of a car. Some folks don't even have the luxury of a house, but we should have the luxury of the Constitution. All of us, every person, it doesn't matter who we are, every person should have the luxury of the Constitution, because that's what it is. And so, I heard our city manager say that she will support you in doing whatever you think that you should do. So I'm going to lean on your conscience and invite you to do a holistic policy. When you roll this out, I believe it is in the best interest of the community, and it will serve equity in every way. So I invite you to do that and to further conversations about this. And again, I want to thank the commission, who's done an epic job, and I want to thank our city manager, and I want to really thank the NAACP again and city council people in this room who've constantly been on the support team to make sure that the Constitution is a right for every one of us. Thank you.
Are there any more public comments? Okay, well, thank you everyone who shared and asked questions and inquired about the written consent. We're going to continue to move down the agenda into new business. And again, Chief Bailey. So at this time, we're going to just go into just an introduction of Police Chief and the vision of policing in Asheville, which I think some of those questions have been addressed earlier. But for the commission, if you have your questions that you sent out at this time, feel free to ask them. But also, I believe Police Chief has them as well. So I'll just go ahead and open up the floor to you.
I'm going to be very brief on this because I'm still, our priorities, although they're probably obvious to most of you, I'm still working through them. It's a working document, and my assistant is in the room, and so this document has been moved up and down multiple times over the years. So I'm going to give you just quickly just 6 of the broad areas that we're going to focus on. There's a lot of bullet points underneath them, and some of my random ideas that I come up with on the sheet. I don't want to discuss those because then you'll say, well, that's a great idea. Then I'll have to go figure out a way to pay for it. So those conversations I have to have with Ms. Campbell and figure it out. But first and foremost, right at the top of it is to improve community police relations. We have to build trust and legitimacy based on mutual respect, transparency, and accountability. And APD is committed to the concept of 21st century policing. The second one is we can't forget what the fundamental purpose of law enforcement, other than to serve our community, is to protect life and property. And so number 2 on the thing that we have to do is we have to reduce crime, and we have to reduce the fear of crime. But we do that by partnering and engaging with community and problem-solving philosophy. When we have better communication, understanding about what our neighbors want and need from their police department, then we have better solutions that work, and we have to focus on those specific people, places, and activities that are related specifically to violent crime. I always refer to as the people that we should be scared of rather than the people that we're mad at. We're mad at a lot of people. I don't like that you walked on the street smoking that joint, but really is that what our attention needs to be focused on. So we have to focus on the people, places, and activities, specifically those committing violence. Number 3, and that is, these are in no specific order, is to improve the quality of life in our community. And we do that by collaborating with the community, other city and county agencies, nonprofits, non-government agencies, businesses, and other stakeholders to identify, mediate, and eliminate obstacles which degrade the quality of life for all those in our city, especially those who are underserved or underrepresented and left behind. Poverty, or crime, is a symptom of poverty. Negative interactions that occur between the police and our community oftentimes are the result of people who are sometimes desperate. I mean, sometimes we encounter, I know we've had people that rob pizza delivery guys for $15 in a pizza. Are they doing that because they hope to get rich, or are they doing that because they're hungry, because they have a need that needs to be met? And so we have to use data to identify, and there's a great example of this in Denver called the Opportunity Index. And what the Opportunity Index does, it looks at the census tracts and examines all the data in those individual areas to find out not only what the crime activity is, but what is the educational levels, what is the poverty levels, what does food insecurity look like, what is mental health, and all those things. And then once we have that information, that data, then we can look at those issues in a holistic approach in order to address the man, I'm having trouble tonight. The long-term issues that contribute to crime, and create, I think, has created some of these adversarial relationships that exist, notwithstanding. Part of that is that law enforcement is the most visible form of government. We see people at their worst almost daily, and that is an opportunity for us to identify what a specific need is. If there were, and I've said this before, you don't get an award for how many arrests you make. There's no special trophy at the end of the year, no bonus. And after about 3 years of chasing bad guys and all that, I'd rather have just made it through my shift peacefully. And so if we can figure out ways to give officers alternatives to arrest, or ways that we can push people out of the criminal justice system, that's a benefit for everybody. But there has to be those back-end services, because the police, when someone in the neighborhood calls 911 because there's a disorder issue, there's an issue, that person who is a citizen, who enjoys the same rights as everybody else, expects that there's a problem that's solved. And simply going there, seeing what it is, and walking away is not going to make that person who called 911 happy. It may make a lot of other people happy, but it may not make the person that called the police happy. So there has to be alternatives to incarceration, but more importantly than that, there has to be support and back-end services. Indianapolis, we've filled a few apartment buildings in one of our corridors, a main stretch through Indianapolis, and what we put in the building are people with like issues: drug abuse, substance abuse, formerly homeless, mentally ill, and we put them in the same room or in the same buildings with no support or any mechanism. So what do you think happens? They revert back to what caused them to be in here in the first place, where we have violence, we have substance abuse, we have theft, we have all those things because we think we're solving a problem by housing them, but we're providing them no support or back-end services. We haven't told them how to get their medication. We haven't provided them a way to get to their medication. We haven't told them what services are available for them for free. And so, once again, we put the police in the position to have to solve a problem. And I talk a lot about Indianapolis because that's my experience right now. And there's a lot of issues there. The Marion County Jail, 45% of the people there are suffering from mental illness. 700 psychotropic drugs a day are delivered at a cost of $10 million to the county taxpayers, just dealing with people who are suffering from mental illness, because there are no other options. They're in crisis, they're having a problem, they have to go somewhere. There isn't a hospital we can take them to, so the jail becomes the hospital. And there we criminalize homelessness, and we criminalize those that are suffering from mental illness. And then we blame the police, which I'm not escaping our issues, but the system has to provide other alternatives. And just think what we could do with $10 million to treat those suffering from substance abuse and mental illness in Indianapolis, Marion County, if we had it other way. That said, in the new jail that they're building in Marion County, there is a door. Probably you're going to take the prisoner in, and there'll be a diversion, one way or the other. You're the neighborhood. You're always intoxicated, so we always take you to jail. You go sober up, and you're out. Well, now we take him to the building to the right in the engagement center, where resources are offered at the time and place. That's what's happening. Am I getting off track? I'm sorry. So number 4. And going back to the improvement of quality of life, we started carrying non-perishable food in our cars. We brought food pantries to the neighborhoods. We started doing social service. We called them sweeps. We don't like that area, but if we did a law enforcement operation, we'd go in there a week or two later with the fire department, with the health department, with mental health services, with food pantry folks, and we go door to door and asking them what do you need? What do you need? And trying to give them the services right there. Well, I'm a veteran, but I don't know how to set up an appointment at the VA to get my medication. Or I know that it's there, but I don't have a way to get there. So providing bus cards and other things, partnering with one of the Lyfts or Uber to give people rides to grocery stores in order to get food, because there aren't grocery stores in some of their underserved neighborhoods. And so people get their food from the gas stations, and they're eating Twinkies and drinking soda all day long instead of getting access to fresh, healthy food. So those are issues. We have to support our officers and the professional staff and care for their wellness. Policing in the 21st century, we talk a lot about that, is tough. Just today, the 9th person this year on the New York City Police Department killed themselves. If we don't take care of the people that take care of us, then how can we expect for them to do a good job out in the neighborhood? We ask a lot of our police officers, put them under a tremendous amount of stress to be perfect every single time, and we know that human beings are not perfect and can't be. We have to support them when they're right, just as robustly as we cast them out when they're wrong. So we have to have a wellness program. And then training. We have to have a continuous review of our training to see if we're meeting the needs of the community, the officers' national standards, and that our training is constantly changing with the times. Just today I sat down with the dean at AB Tech to discuss where we're at, what we're training, and how we can improve that. So those discussions are ongoing. And then the final thing there, and then there'll be more as we go on, is improve operational efficiency. And when I talk about that, I talk about reviewing our operations within the department to make sure we're being effective and efficient with the taxpayers' money, that we're finding cost savings when we're available, that we're reviewing the organizational structure to make sure it makes sense not only for today but in the future, because this is a growing city, and I think we're going to be very surprised what that looks like after the next census in the city and what that looks like going forward based on the developments that are occurring in West Asheville and South Asheville and all over, and how those are going to impact policing services going forward. So those are the quick 6 priority areas that we have with lots of bullet points underneath.
Thank you. All right, so now we're just going to open up some discussion and questions for the commission only, and pertaining to the vision of Chief Bailey. Ms. Betty?
I'd just like to urge the chief, I understand that training is an issue as far as getting police officers off the street, but I also understand that they are under a lot of stress, and I would strongly urge you to make sure that all the officers have trauma training. The stress that they encounter just walking up on a scene, when they have those skills to offset, skills like breathing and other things, it makes a difference. So learning those skills is extremely important. Officers have PTSD. That's a fact. You know, they're like soldiers every day, all day, walking up on a scene of an incident. And that training really helps.
Again, appreciate all this forthcoming honesty and transparency from the department and the city. Here in this city, we have a almost 12% black population. The pullover rate is 3 times that amount from police officers to to the citizens of the city, whether they be pedestrians or, I think those were actually vehicular stops. Do you personally think that a number that high is a sign of implicit bias and some form of racism within the police department? Because those numbers are 3 times exponentially higher than our population. So I'd like to know how you feel about that as a chief, and what are you going to do to curb that number to where it's not such a disparity within our black community here?
I wish I had a definitive answer for you, but I just don't. I don't know that it means that there is a definite implicit bias. Obviously, there's an issue, and we got to figure out what that issue is. And so that's my commitment, is to try to do our very best to figure out what exactly that is and why we're stopping people, where we're stopping people, what is the priority. Right? One thing that we can't do is hope to solve community problems by blanketing an area and stopping everything that moves and locking everybody up. It just doesn't work. I would rather our traffic stop philosophy and be more focused on specific individuals. If there's a reason that person is a high-value focus for law enforcement, and then also to focus on where the data tells us we have more crashes, vehicle crashes, and and fatalities, because those are on the rise. And what that means, it may not mean much to some. Why would we care about the way people drive when they crash? Well, if you live in Asheville, your insurance goes up every time there's multiple crashes in an area. If the crashes go up or stolen vehicles go up, the insurance companies don't just eat that cost. They pass it on to all of you and your premiums. So we have to find out what the purpose of our traffic stops are, and then focus and narrowly focus the officers on a specific task.
Thank you, Chief. Probably I'm the only one who picked up on this, is that to a few of your questions, the answer was, I don't know. And I appreciate that for a lot of reasons, that we have somebody who finally has not come to Asheville with a predetermined set of procedures that may not work here. So I appreciate that you say you do not know. I like that answer versus some type of standard response. So I appreciate that, and I think that that's indicative of where we need to go. We need to really get down and figure out where we are and what we have to do. My questions revolve around community policing. I grew up here when Asheville was not cool, which was in the 80s, and we had community policing. And what I mean by community policing is that I went to school with the children of police officers. Police officers lived in our neighborhoods. police officers worshiped with us. Most police officers in Asheville at that time were native-born Ashevilleans, so they knew people in the community. We have no resemblance of that today. Many of our officers, they can't afford to live here. If you are black people, actually can get into law enforcement and thrive everywhere except Asheville. So when we do get that talent, we're not able to retain them. What will it take? What will it cost to have a police force that can afford to live in the city of Asheville, take care of their family, and actually be a part of the community? You can't have community policing, in my opinion, if you don't live here, if your family is not here. And I know that the cost is going to be great, but we just need to know what that is, and we need to push forward. Because I don't see community policing working for people who live in Haywood County, Yancey County, Henderson County. This is just a place they come in during the day, and then they go home in their part of the community. So can you please, please, please help us have real community policing? Not barbecues and ice cream and those little feel-good things. I'm not interested in that anymore.
I'm not going to turn around and look at my city manager right now. I'm just going to look at you, all right? No, I think we have some work to do, and you know, we're one of the few police departments in Western North Carolina, I'm told, that still sends sponsors and pays for officers to go to the police academy. So if you go to AB Tech and there's a class of 30, half of them are going to be paid and be sponsored by APD, which is important. Where that hurts us is then the other municipalities who may have a shinier car, or the pay may be the same, or maybe something that's small that pulls these officers out of here. I know the gentleman back there talked about how young the officers are. That's because there is it's young because the retention level is an issue, and I don't know if that's just based on pay. I sat through a human resources session on Monday for 4 hours, and they gave us some questions to do. What makes you happy at work? And all the things that people put on the board, not one of them was pay. A lot of it was these intangible things that they feel like they're supported. And these weren't police officers. There was a person from Parks Department, 2 from sanitation, the new assistant city manager was in there, and then me, and a couple other folks. And you know, do they feel supported? Do they feel valued? Does their input matter? Do they have a say in how the organization runs? Those kind of things are important. And frankly, in some of our exit interviews, the support that the officers feel like they don't get from people in the community sometimes force them out of the city of Asheville into other cities. And so those are issues. I mean, recruiting and retention is a problem nationwide. We had Seattle come to Indianapolis trying to recruit people. It didn't work. But that forced us to raise our starting pay from $39,000 to $51,000 to compete with other municipalities, because we're training the largest agency in the state, and then they were leaving and going somewhere else. So it's a significant issue, and we're going to have to work together as a community to find out what that solution is, and be willing to do the things necessary to get people in the door and keep them in the door. And just for a minute, while I have the mic one more time, we really need to increase the number of minority candidates and African Americans that come to the door to take the test. Because the last 2 weekends, the last 2 times we've taken the test, there wasn't a single person of color that took the test. I can't hire as a police chief, which the bottom line to hire one, I think, is up to me. I don't know, Peggy. But I can't select African American candidates to be police officers if none of them, if there aren't any that come in the door to take the test. So I need your help getting folks in the door to help. And I think you hit the nail on the head on some of the issues. So community policing is important, but even more than that is when you're part of the community, you're invested in what happens. And so I agree with you 100%. I live in the city of Asheville. I can barely afford it.
Thank you for that, Michael. Chief, my question is, when you're within your prior department, your police chief designed a diversity and inclusion department within the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. How has this department impacted the narrative when it comes to people of color? And were there noticeable changes to your police data? And is that something that we could consider here, working with the city's equity and inclusion department?
That's a fairly new program. I'm very familiar with that, and the captain that runs it's Captain John Walton. And it's funny because I reached out to him earlier in the week to talk about how the progress was going, and he was on vacation at the time, but he's going to send me his information to see how that works. Not everything that we did there, obviously, like you mentioned, is going to be something that works here. The department is so vast there that it's nice that what the good thing about it is that John or Captain Walton has a seat at the table. If he calls the chief and has an issue, that he had a seat in front of the chief whenever he wanted it, and so that's important. And I'm not opposed to looking in that at all here in the city of Asheville to see if it'll work.
Is there any type of performance metrics that's taken place? Data collection?
That's what I have to find out from him. I know for a good 2 years, our classes were very diverse. Our recruit classes were very diverse because we went on a hiring spree, and then all of a sudden it dropped again for unknown reasons. But the thing that with the Captain Walton and that program is that he has a voice with the chief to bring issues and he's also the president of the Minority Police Officers Association, so he brings a lot of information back to those meetings.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you. You had mentioned previously in Indianapolis they had developed an engagement center. Do you foresee something like that possibly being developed in this area?
That's out of my purview. I would certainly encourage that, and it's not as robust as they'd hoped for in Indianapolis either. So there was limited to just the downtown area at first because the engagement center was downtown, and most of the people that were going in there were going to be those that are suffering from mental illness, excuse me, and those homeless individuals that their officers encountered in the city. We also had a very robust homeless unit, and so every day they were out working with those homeless folks in the camps with clinicians and other providers checking in with folks during their work shift hours, and they were assigned out of the downtown district. The engagement centers, I think, work. I think if you look at what Seattle did with LEAD, and now I think I saw some departments in Texas are also taking off with that program. But you have to have the back-end service. You can't just have an area or come into the jail and go, well, your charge is this, so we're going to divert you and send you out the back door and expect that that's going to solve the problem. Now, you may not have that person in your jail, and if your goal is just to reduce the number of people in your jail, then you might be successful at that, but you're not helping that individual by bringing them in there and then putting them out the back door just to do the same things they were doing before with no help or support. So there has to be back-end support, and there has to be enough beds, and there has to be enough space. If not, it won't be able to keep up with demand, and ultimately it will fail.
And you kind of touched on what my follow-up was going to be, and this is in relation to what Reverend Amy Cantrell was talking about. Our homeless population in this area has really kind of skyrocketed in the last 10 years, and it sounds like you have some new ideas potentially about dealing with homeless people on the streets as they encounter your staff.
I wouldn't say they're new ideas because I stole them from someplace else or something that we've done well. It's going to be a matter for us. It's going to be a matter of how do we staff those ideas, how do we put the people and train and find the right person. I mean, really, the people that do our homeless outreach in Indy are people that really are committed and care about these folks. I mean, no one forces anybody to do that job. I mean, they do it voluntarily, and they go in some pretty rough conditions in some of these camps and deal with people in some pretty bad situations. So they have to have the right heart too on that. So, but we're more than willing to work with any organization we can to try to find solutions to not criminalize homelessness, because it's not a criminal issue. However, there are issues that have to be addressed. I set I've said at the table in major city chiefs, cities like Seattle, or Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and LA and San Diego, and none of these cities can tackle this problem. So it's not just unique to us. And the more services that are provided, the more homeless folks that come, and they can't ever get ahead of it. And one thing that I found surprising was that even with the outreach and things that they do, the one thing that never changes is the amount of times police have to respond to issues involving the homeless. So even all the money that LA puts into it, still has not reduced police response to issues because of just some pretty. It's sad. It's a terrible state that we're in right now.
Thank you.
And before I go to Ms. Betty, we have just several members who haven't had an opportunity to speak, and I just wanted to open up that space for anyone who's interested. No pressure. Ivan?
Yeah, I had a question about the written consent policy. You mentioned that only Durham is the only other municipality that enforces written consent. Just with your experience in the police department, why is it that it's not more common within North Carolina or in general?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. It's I think it's a child born of the 21st century policing report. So I think people are still trying to wrap their heads around it and see. And that's why we have to be able to collect data that's good so that it can see whether or not it impacts what we're trying to impact and whether or not it's worth implementing in other places across the country. I think it'll catch steam in some places, but I can't answer why it's not something that's been prevalent. We've always used a written consent form when asking someone to search their house in Indianapolis, just because the framers of the Constitution put there for a reason that was being so important to them that they named it by name. So I think it's important that we did that written consent for homes for sure. But it was a new concept to me when I interviewed. I hadn't even thought about that.
Ms. Betty?
So I want to say thank you for agreeing to come to Asheville. Very brave. A lot of times in meetings I like to ask how many people are native Ashevilleans. And in most of the meetings, there are very few. I've been in Asheville since I was 3 years old. And I wanted to say thank you again for coming, you and the city manager, for being open to coming to help or hopefully make positive changes, especially to the Black community. You will find in meetings that a lot of us are angry, we're upset, we're frustrated, and we will attack. But it's not you, it's the system that has existed for years here. And prayerfully, you will make the right decisions to make positive changes. But thanks again for coming.
And my final question is, has an officer within your prior department ever received disciplinary action based on their racial bias? According to the IMPD disciplinary policy, has anyone ever been demoted or discharged based on racism and or profiling?
Not that I can recall, because that's a pretty tough standard to get to, right? I mean, you're going to have some pretty clear and convincing evidence that the behavior the officer displayed was overtly bias-based. But certainly bias-based policing is illegal, and it's not something that APD should ever be involved in, and if it's uncovered, it will be dealt with.
Thank you. Yeba?
Hi. First, thank you for coming and being so transparent. I also want to thank you. It's kind of refreshing, I think, to hear a person in power kind of talk about the systems that be and how change needs to happen there. I feel like you don't always get to hear that. So thank you for addressing that, and thank you for being aware of that. I personally believe that everyone who kind of grows up in the United States has some prejudice of some sort, just because we do live in a very racialized system. It was very much set up this way. It was very intentional. So within your police trainings, sorry, is that going to be addressed, the racial bias that is happening very blatantly in many cases. And is there a way for public to kind of see what type of trainings the police officers will go through? Is there a way for public comment to, if we see in the community that maybe something is missing that needs to be there, we can kind of address it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's been some pretty traumatic events that have happened involving the police department for the last couple of years, and I know that are publicly known, and there's, like you said, things been going on for a long period of time. And the agency has taken some tremendous steps forward. There's still work to do, and any agency that just stops and think you throw up the mission accomplished sign in the back is fooling themselves, because there's always something new and some other way to get better. And training once in a particular topic is not, every year we train on proficiency in firearms, because it's a deadly weapon and we have to know how to use it correctly if the time comes. And so there also needs to be those things that we want to reinforce in our officers every single year through consistent training more and more. And so that's part of my conversation with AB Tech. I don't control them. I can't tell them how to train. I don't have my own police academy here in Asheville. So I have to work with partners who also send their officers to the training. And today my conversation with the Dean of AB Tech, specifically dealing with training, was some of his conversations, some of the agencies want their officers in there and out of there as quick as they can. And I told him that is absolutely not what Asheville Police Department wants. Whether it's 6 months, whether it's 4 months or 6 months, what we want is an officer that comes out with good baseline training with all the things that we as a community believe are important, and then we'll give them even more when they come back to us. So expediency is not our priority or what we're going to be looking for. We're looking for solid training with certain things that are ingrained from day one to the last day. De-escalation, being mindful of biases and cultural awareness, all those things need to be in every single thing you do, whether it's criminal law, it's traffic stops, or whether you're talking about CIT training. All those play on each other, and there's certain things that have to be ingrained in every one of those things. But it's going to take me some time to figure that out. We have to have a bigger voice on how that training looks, and they were committed to listening and being a part of that conversation. So that's a good first start. But if they don't get it at the academy or the college, the technical college, then we can give it to them here once they belong to us again.
All right, so I'm sorry. Michael wanted to ask a question, and we really do have to wrap up commission and then go up to...
Just two quick things. One is the Citizens Police Academy. I took it twice. I think it's an invaluable resource in many regards of learning the mechanics of the police department. And really, we're blessed in many regards to have some things that we have at the police department. That's why I'm so hard on it, because we don't lack for many of the things that other agencies would kill to have. I shouldn't say that, but we'll be very happy to have some of the resources that we have made available here. The other thing is how information is disseminated to the public, and how that information is reviewed and controlled before it gets out there. And I think many of us know what we're talking about was the gang information. And that's been very difficult to try to unring that veil, because once it goes out, if there's anything that's supplementary that comes after that, the public doesn't know that. We have people walking around here think there's over 1,000 gangbangers in Asheville, and I'm like, well, where could they possibly be at any given point? Not discounting that there is gang activity here. We have a terrible problem with people with guns who get arrested. They go downtown with minimal bail, and they are back out to go get the guns that the police didn't get the first go around. So we have a problem with that. But we've got to have better control over the narrative, that we're not instilling unnecessary fear that can reinforce bad policy making. So how can you as chief really take an active role in not manipulating the numbers, but really questioning the numbers and making sure they're right the first time?
I appreciate that comment, and I think the department's apologized for the way that went out. What we need to do with information is provide context, because that's really important. We don't want to people think there's a gang member on every corner, and that's not the case. And the neighborhoods that were identified in that are 99% of the people that live in there are good people who want the same things that we all want. They want to live peacefully. They want to sit on their porch with their kids. They want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the thing that we're all promised. And so what we have to do is we have to provide context to the information before it goes out. And we have a robust system in place now. It'll keep getting better as we move forward. I have a background as a public information officer, so I dealt with information and the media on a daily basis in my previous role. And so we'll continue to get better at that and make sure, try not to prevent things like that from happening in the past. I mean, we were just very honest yesterday. We put out information with context about the increase that we're seeing in property crimes and bicycle thefts and auto thefts and larcenies or breaking in vehicles. But we provided context to it when we sent it out, and we didn't demonize a certain neighborhood. We talked about that these are occurring all across the community and what ways people can help the police prevent these things. As far as the gang concerned, where our focus needs to be is on trying to find training to keep our kids out of those situations, find out why they go to them in the first place, and then also provide education to parents and teachers on what signs look like of gang membership and how to try to steer their children out of those things. That should be our focus, not the number of gangs. It's really not important, or the number of gang members. What's important is focusing our attention on, like you said, on the most violent people. And not every trigger puller is a gang member, and not every drug dealer is a trigger puller. So our focus needs to be on those violent people and getting illegally possessed guns off the street. I was all over the place there, but did I answer your question? All right. Can I stop talking now, Madam Chair?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
We're almost done. You're fine. But at this time,
I lost 5 pounds, too, from the heat.
Thank you so much just for being here and being willing to answer some hard questions and have the dialogue. If there are any more commission members, if we can just park lot some of our questions, and then we'll revisit those a little later. At this time, I'm sorry? Yes, absolutely. At this time, we want to open it up to public comment. And as a reminder, it's public comment we want to address to the commission. And we want to encourage you to please keep it as brief as possible. But if anyone would like to make a comment, come on up, Ms. Libby.
They no longer look at them as the people who are protecting our neighborhood. They look at them as people who are damaging our neighborhood. And so what is the plan in terms of working with our children and youth to help them feel secure and safe in their neighborhoods? And when they see someone in a uniform, they feel and invoke immediately. What type of community engagement is going to happen around those aspects? 4 weeks ago, on my way to pick up my child from a KAA trip on South French Broad, I was pulled over, and I don't know why I was pulled over, don't know what the officer thought, but when he finally approached my window, he said, "I put in the wrong tag number, have a nice night," and that was the end of it. He had no care or concern for the trauma that he had just inflicted on me. So where is the training that helps officers to understand that you are in a community, and several communities, where people have been adversely affected by policing? Where is the training that says, my duty is, yes, I need to keep myself safe, but I also need to be mindful of the children, youth, and the people who've been harmed in these situations that occurred over the last few years. Actually, they've been occurring many years. We just now have the technology to see these occurring. So I would love it if at some point in some presentation, we get some answers as to timelines on when things are going to be implemented, concrete answers. We get some information on what can we do and where can we go so that our children are being introduced to police officers in a positive light. I don't think most parents want their kids to be afraid of police officers. But as a parent, I can only control so much. And what my child sees in community and how people interact with her in community are outside of my control. So what are we going to do as a city, as the Asheville Police Department, to ensure that we are setting up situations in community where our children and youth are being positively affected by the Asheville Police Department? I'm going to stop there. I have more to say, but I know it's time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Libby. Well, if you want to, but it's just public comment. And what I'm hearing you say is that, community engagement as well as cultural sensitivity to adverse reactions when officers pull individuals of color over.
And also, I think that there should be some type of implicit bias test administered to Asheville Police Department. Harvard University has one. It's accessible online. There are some basic steps that we could, or I say we, but the police department could implement to kind of weed people out. And I do mean just that, weed people out. There are lots of people within our system, educationally, governmental, and within the police department, who already have a mindset that when I see little Joe Brown, I'll have all these images that stir up in me, and so I'm not safe, and I need to make sure I protect myself. Joe Brown could be 12, 22, or 52. All they see is brown and danger.
Thank you so much, Ms. Libby. Are there any more public comments? Ashley?
So I want to thank you, Commission, for making this public opportunity available and all of this insight to you, City Manager and Chief, for also being here and sharing all of this information. I also appreciate the transparency, and I hope that what I look forward to is maybe hearing community members say, I had this conversation with an officer that's kind of like the conversations we're having here, but instead of happening here with just the chief, we actually have other officers, and it's happening in neighborhoods and in regular places. I just want to respond to a few things. There's been a lot of mentioning about trauma. Ms. Betty and Ms. Kiles are mentioned that, and Chief, you said that, officers are trained in the proficiency in firearms because it's a deadly weapon. And I just want to acknowledge that the human body is a deadly weapon. The finger that's pulling the trigger is a deadly weapon. And the unconscious ways that both the trauma that police officers experience and the bias that's being talked about, that is part of the deadly weapon. And so the importance of that kind of proficiency training in what is it that's living inside officers' bodies. And I will just offer that there's a book called My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Minikin, and it actually has chapters that are just for law enforcement bodies, My Grandmother's Hands. And it gives, you were talking about wellness, it gives a lot of really specific examples of wellness that can be done inside police departments. So just to stress that deadly weapon of the human body. You also mentioned the importance of helping to get people of color through the door in the hiring. And I just want to acknowledge that the reputation is not one that it's a safe place for officers of color to work, for officers of color to be treated well. And so that part of the getting more folks in the hiring process is how the reputation of the department changes. So hopefully this is the beginning of that starting to happen. I also wanted to acknowledge that, you know, kind of in relation, Ms. Kiles was just saying about the description of what was being looked for in all of that public engagement that was done before you were hired, or before the chief was hired, was a lot of feedback about, and the question was, if you could make suggestions to the new chief, what would they be? And so I hope you've seen these 3 pages of suggestions that have been made, because it's a lot of the things that have been said here today. And one of the big ones was about the youth. That I noticed that one repeated many times, is relationships with youth, involvement with youth, how youth are feeling about police officers. And maybe if in the future, you know, I truly appreciated hearing the vision that you have, and also the opportunity to hear what are you hearing from us and how is that being implemented, because I think that's part of the trust building. And then also I really appreciated you talking about in your priorities the recognition of the systems providing other alternatives. And one of the unfortunate parts about Asheville is we don't have a lot of funding streams. We don't have money coming from a lot of different directions, and the city is one of the largest 5 employers, and the police department has a disproportionately higher budget than everything else in the city. And so when it comes time to looking at the budget, I hope that that priority that you have of providing other alternatives shows up in, you know, some collaboration about where money is allocated. And then I too just want to say that the climate that we're living in right now in this country is also very true in this city. And we've seen by, I mean, I haven't researched, but there was a arrest this week, and you know, it seemed like there was stress around race. And so I just also want to stress the importance of officers being trained in how to deal with people that are feeling fearful for their lives right now. And so when people are afraid, when there's anxiety, when trauma is being re-triggered, people don't necessarily act in the most lawful ways, but it's the climate that we're living in right now, and I think that's another layer of what officers are going to have to be dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Mr. Harris?
My name is Roy Harris, and I am a 33-year resident of what I call the South Side, which is this area. Some of you may have even forgotten about a year and a half ago, the commission was in this room, and I think that should be training for our new police chief, so that you'll see a lot of other voices that, and I don't know whether it was filmed that night or whatever, but there was, I mean, it was even that the commission itself was fighting among itself. And I'll never forget that someone that was here to protect us and be on that there was even microphone pulling and fussing among yourself. So what I'm going to do right now, I am going to invite the commission back 1 year from today, and not so much to hear what the police chief has to say and the city manager. I want to hear what you have to say and how you have gone about the policies that you have tried to enact, or policies that you push down to the city manager and the police chief. And I notice there's new faces up there. And as these new faces, it's your time. Can't blame it on nobody else. It's your time to help us get some of these things right. And as we go forward in, again, 1 year from today, or a year from today, invite you back to those same seats. And as you come back and everything, have the, you know, if you want to have the police chief report out, city manager report out, but I'm getting old, and so talking doesn't get it with me anymore. Some action items that you have said, we accomplished this, or we did this, or we went here, or whatever. That's what I want to hear. Because one of the things is, as we was talking a few minutes ago, I'm like, yeah, I see a lot of police in my neighborhood, South Side, especially at the corner of South French Broad and Bartlett Avenue. But one of the things I would like, police chief, most of the police interaction I see in my neighborhood sometimes, the blue lights are on. I want to see more of it where the blue lights are not on and when we interact and everything. So good luck to all of you. I'll be here and I'll be around, so come back 1 year from now.
I'd just like to make one clarification as a board as a whole. Mr. Harris, you were referring to CPAC. We've never had a meeting in public space here. Last year, you were speaking of the March 8th meeting in which Chief Hooper was relegated. That is the Citizens Police Advisory Commission. We're the Human Relations Commission for the City of Asheville. Many of us were in that room. Many of the people in this room were in that room, but that was not this board. I just want to make clarification for public record on that issue.
Okay. You're still invited back.
We'll be back.
All right, and I just want, it's 7:53, so let's just be mindful of time. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate that a lot of what happens here belongs to us as individuals. I also want to say that the police department has been relegated to take on a lot of our problems. We haven't adequately dealt with poverty and all of the other issues that are in our community. And we send the police department out there to think that, and they're not social workers, okay? Let us also just acknowledge that there are a lot of people with a lot of skills who are excluded in this community for various sundry reasons, but we need everybody who is able, who wants to participate, and who is willing to participate. One of the things that we've done with the NAACP Criminal Justice Reform Committee, when we put that whole process together, we had to strategically do so. This police department is no different. You can recommend books, you can recommend tapes, whatever you want to recommend. There is protocol and procedure that they can follow. 21st century policing, which is the gold standard. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with that. Where they have a health and wellness component for the officers. The other thing is what you love, you pay for, okay? So if you want great police officers who are educated and the other things, those of us who know how to professionally fundraise and do grantsmanship, we need to step up and we need to write some grants to the U.S. DOJ to get these folks some money, and we can demand continuous improvement. There's a lot of things that we have not tackled as a community. So if we're going to expect excellence, we're going to have to do it through and throughout all of our systems. And we are suffering from systemic issues here. This is just not one issue, policing and all of that. If you look at our data sets, and I'm actively involved with a data initiative on the social determinants of health for African Americans in Asheville, North Carolina, we rank at the very worst in all of them. It's just not policing. There was data there. The way that we arrived at this was to use whatever available data was there from traffic stops, and we started with the most logical place, and we really, based on data and everything else that we use, policies and procedures, arrive at the other. But we've got to arrive there in a logical, common sense fashion. There's no magic fix. If you want something done, you're going to have to do it. And like Barack Obama used to say, I hear y'all, you know, maybe it's Southern gentility, maybe it's Southern charm that says, thank you for coming and we're so grateful for you to be here. But Barack Obama said one thing, make me do it. And that's what we have to do with our elected officials. They cannot step outside themselves to render us what we want. Make them do it, and data leads. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Okay, is there anyone else with public comment? Yep. Oh.
My name is Sandy Aldridge. I am part of the CPAC committee. I want to thank you all for being who you are, being here tonight, fighting for us Ashevilleans, us locals. I'd like to thank Councilman Keith Young, who advised me of this meeting, and for City Manager Deborah Campbell, and for the new Chief Bailey. I've spoken with both of them. And I think we all have the same love for our community, and we're not going to stop. Okay, we're going to keep coming to these meetings and fighting for our community. And I'd spoken with this idea that I had with Sergeant Mindel, who comes to the CPAC meetings. I had the idea of adopt a cop. And what that looks like, there is a secular version of this, as well as a faith-based version of this for the churches and everything, for us to encourage our police officers more, to maybe help out with the stress that they incur on a daily basis, protecting us, local and taxpayers. And I would like to give that to y'all as an idea, if y'all would like to think about it and have any comment about it for the future. I think it may be an idea for us to actually add that to our future endeavors with the police department.
Thank you. That's something we can consider. Okay, Commission members, on the agenda, there's an item that I would like to push to our next meeting. So it's an unfinished business, discussing and amending the work plan on policing. And if I could have a motion that we vote to push this to September. Second? All in favor? Excellent. So unfinished business will be moved to September's meeting. All right, so at this time now, we will adjourn, and can I have a motion for that as well? All right, all in favor? All opposed?
Thank you folks for coming out.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you
And then
folks
we-
for all coming out.
Yes.